2024 Stanislaus County Board of Supervisors meeting. It's 9 a.m. and I call this meeting to order. If everybody could please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll have a moment of silence for Beverly Finley, our former director of Stanislaus County Health Services Agency, and an invocation by Reverend Scott Elliott from Big Valley Grace.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have a moment of silence for Beverly Finley.
Please join me as we pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this day that we get to meet together. I thank you, Lord, for the supervisors and all of their time and efforts they put in to make our county a great place. We lift up all the families in our county. We know that going into summer, there's going to be a lot of kids who are going to be looking for things to do. We ask that we would continue to have great programs and services for kids, that families would be safe, especially those that be out at the river and in some of our parks and things. We just ask that you would protect our county, continue to watch over families here, give them a great summer together. We ask that schools would celebrate well at the end of their school years, and families that have graduations and all the celebrations that are going to be taking place over the next few weeks. We just ask for protection and safety for all those schools and their ceremonies. And we just pray your blessing on our county, all the things that are going to be discussed today, just wisdom for all the supervisors in their decision making. And we pray your blessing over this meeting. And I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Appreciate it. All right, next we have a presentation for May 2024 as Behavioral Health Awareness Month. And conducting the presentation will be Kevin Panubunk. Did I do all right? They spelled it out for me.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairman Grewal, members of the board, CEO Hayes, Council Bose, and members of the public. My name is Kevin Panyanawong. I'm the Associate Director and Chief Operations Officer for Stanislaus County Behavioral Health and Recovery Services. I would like to thank the board for proclaiming May as a Behavioral Health Awareness Month. I am honored, along with our staff in the audience, to represent the BHRS this morning to provide a brief overview of our services, and also to remind the public that if you are experiencing or struggling with behavioral health conditions, you are not alone. And it is important that you seek help. According to the California Department of Public Health and the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, 1 in 5 U.S. adults experience behavioral health illness each year. 1 in 25 U.S. adults experience serious and complex behavioral health conditions each year. And that 32% of U.S. adults with mental illness also experience substance use disorder. 1 in 6 U.S. youth and children ages 6 to 17 experience behavioral health disorder each year. So it is important to remind us all that our mental health is as important as our physical health. And to that end, BHS is committed to educate the community on how to recognize mental health symptoms. We're committed to inform the public on how to access behavioral health services. BHS is committed to fight and reduce stigma for individuals and families seeking behavioral health services. It is important to note that mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. So it is crucial for us to understand the important role mental health plays in our overall health and well-being. Our prevention team, along with our promotor contractors, continue to work tirelessly to engage and educate the public about mental health symptoms and how to access help. Within the behavioral health continuum of care, we have 3 managed care providers in Stanislaus County who are contracted with the Department of Health Care Services to provide behavioral health services to Medicare beneficiaries who experience mild and moderate behavioral health conditions. The 3 health plans are Kaiser, Health Plan of San Joaquin, and HealthNet. BHRS, of course, is contracted with the Department of Health Care Services to provide behavioral health treatment to Medicare beneficiaries or uninsured individuals experiencing serious, complex, and persistent behavioral health conditions. Next slide. It's an overview of our children's system of care and transitional age young adults. We provide an array of outpatient services and crisis services within this children's and transitional age young adults system of care. In the blue box represents the county behavioral health operated programs, and the lime green represents our behavioral health partner and contractors. Our children's and youth partners include Child Welfare, Probation, Center for Human Services, Sierra Vista, Central Star, and Asperinet. The next slide. This slide gives you an overview of the adult system of care. Again, the blue box represents the county behavioral health run programs, and the yellow and lime green are contracted providers. They include Telecare, Turning Point, Sierra Vista, and Center for Human Services. Within the adult system of care, we also have a forensic team providing services to a justice-involved population. We're also providing services to care court team, assistant outpatient treatment program, also known as AOT or Laura's Law. The next slide gives you an overview of our substance use disorder system of care. We provide residential program, outpatient treatment and evaluation, medication access clinic, or EMAC, to name a few. Our partner includes Sierra Vista, Center for Human Services, Recover Medical Group, Redwood Treatment Center, Nirvana, and Aegis Treatment Center. BHS also provides public guardian services, housing and employment services for our consumer, peer support services, patient rights, and 24/7 access crisis support, including a mobile crisis unit. Next slide. The graph here shows you the number of clients, unique clients served by BHRS. In calendar year 2023, we served 9,987 clients, and the blue graph is broken down by system of care. Next slide. These slides provide information on how to access services, whether it's through your private insurance providers, managed care health plans, Medicare providers, or county behavioral health services. If you have private insurance, you can call the phone number on your insurance card and ask for behavioral health services. If you have Medi-Cal, you can call one or 3 health plans, depending on your health plan Medi-Cal insurance. It's either Kaiser, Health Plan of San Joaquin, or HealthNet. And of course, you can always call our access line at 888-376-6246. And if you're uninsured, you can also call our access line as well. Next slide. If you're experiencing emotional distress or having suicidal thoughts, you can call or text the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline to speak or chat with a live person, or you can also call our Access Crisis and Support line at, again, 888-376-6246, and that's 24/7. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Sorry. And in closing, I would like to thank the board, the Behavioral Health Board member, who many of them are here today, for your ongoing support of our department. And I'd like to thank our agency partners, contractors. Some of them are here today, La Familia, SCOE, and NAMI are in the audience. And I also like to thank our entire leadership, BHS leadership, and our frontline staff who continue to work tireless to do amazing work each day to serve our county residents. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the presentation and appreciate everything you and your department do. Mental health and behavioral health are huge parts of Stanislaus County, and we are appreciative of you and your staff taking care of all those that need the help and the resources that you provide. So it's an honor as board to announce May 2024 as Behavioral Health Awareness Month in Stanislaus County. To a lot of the points that Kevin said, many people don't know that the resources or the help is available, so please encourage those that you know that need those services, that Stanislaus County provides those services. This is that month to let everybody know. So thank you for everything you do. And if you want any of your team members to come and join.
Partners and our staff to be up front. Great.
Man, I didn't get the memo. You guys are wearing fluorescent green and wearing black. That's not a good color.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Supervisor Conduct. Yeah.
You want to come and take the picture? If board members want to join, I know a lot of you guys, please feel free.
We're good. You got a big crowd. You can go for it.
Gotta get closer.
Thank you.
You know, while Manny's walking back here, Kevin, I just want to thank you guys for all the work that you do at BHRS. You know, since I started here, 14 years ago, I think our budget has doubled in that time frame, and it's for a reason, because there is such a need out there, and just we are so proud of all the work that you and your staff do, that those involved in our BHRS board do, to our partner agencies do. It's just amazing work, and there's so much coming at you, you know, legislatively nowadays. I mean, they're just the changes that we're seeing, and the requirements and the needs are just unbelievable. And so I know you guys have your hands full, and I couldn't tell you how much we appreciate. I couldn't say enough of how much we appreciate the work you're doing, and keep up the good work. It's hard. I know we have. I'm going to use this chance to plug my cannabis issue. You know, we have so many things going on, so many things that are counterproductive. You know, that are causing and making your job worse. Cannabis being one of them, and I can't imagine how hard it is to do what you guys are doing. So so we love you guys, and thank you very much for all you're doing.
Thank you. Right, next I have a public comment period for any items not on the agenda. If anybody from the public would like to comment. It's 2 meetings in a row, no public comment. All right, I'm gonna move on. Next to consent calendar. We have consent item B3 being pulled off by Supervisor Chiesa.
Yes, so I need to step down. This has to do with, I received a Levine Act donation, but what I find interesting about this is we talk about how complicated this is. If you take more than $250 from someone, you have to step down a year prior, year after. And these are, well, on the consent calendar today, there's probably 25 or 30 items, and they're LLCs and corporations, and you're never quite sure who the ownership is. So we have this backup system that Tom and his team had created, county council, so they fill out
the applicant fills out and signs whether they've given donations or not. And it was actually caught that way because I wouldn't have been able to catch this one based on, it has to do with our old shelter. So as we continue to work through this, anytime you're in an election cycle, as 3 of us were a couple years ago, this becomes an issue and you got to be super vigilant. And thanks, Tom, for catching this one.
All right, so if I can have a.
Mr. Chair, I'd also like to pull B3.
Okay. B3. All right.
I said, since you're going to pull it, we're going to do the consent calendar minus B3?
I need a 4/5 vote on the.
Yes, okay.
How do I do that?
Which one do you want to take?
He wants B3 off.
You're taking B3?
I just would like to make a comment on it.
Yeah,
No, no,
okay.
no,
Oh, for comment, I thought you had the same
I-
Yeah,
issue.
sorry.
anyways.
All right,
Are you gonna
please.
take up-
Yeah.
but
Please
Before you
proceed.
do that, we should take up the consent calendar. Manny? Yes. The consent calendar minus B3, then I'll leave.
All right, all items on consent calendar, not other than B3, if I can get a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, I got a motion from Supervisor Keyes, a second from Supervisor Buckcondit. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries 5-0. Item B3, and Supervisor Buckcondit has
Yeah.
comment.
Thank you, Chair. Within the contract, the tenant would also be responsible for site security, maintenance, and utility costs. I drove by this property yesterday. I've driven by it several times. The property looks in disarray. There's a boat sitting in the front parking lot on its hull, a couch, a pile of debris. I think we just need to hold the tenant more responsible in making this property more presentable. I'm sure the neighbors would love it, although it's in the industrial park. There's no reason for that property to look in that way.
Absolutely. The tenant has already been contacted this morning in the process of removing the debris that was noticed yesterday. And they have until, I believe it's November 2025 to exercise the purchase option on that property. Otherwise, it reverts to the county. And at that time, staff would recommend to redeclare it surplus, go through the new Surplus Land Act requirements, and sell the property to another interested party, should that come to fruition.
Thank you.
All right, any public comment on any of the items?
And I'll get my boat out of there tomorrow, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah, okay.
All right, seeing none, bring it
It'll
back to
need a
the,
motor.
bring it back to the board for a possible motion.
Motion to approve staff recommendations for item B3.
Second.
All right, motion by Supervisor Withrow, second by Supervisor Chance Condit. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries 4-0. Somebody wants to left. All right, next item on the agenda is a public hearing. Public hearing to consider the Planning Commission's recommendation of approval for development agreement for Irish City Farms to adopt a new development agreement for use permit. And so there's a lot of stuff going on, so I'm going to let Jeremy Ballard explain this. So, public hearing, thank you, Jeremy.
Good morning, Chair Grewal, members of the board, CEO Hayes, County Council Bowes, Jeremy Ballard, Senior Planner with the Planning Department, here to present you a new development agreement for Irish City Farms. And so, Irish City, the request before you is this morning to adopt a development agreement for an existing commercial cannabis indoor cultivation and distribution operation, which the development agreement will expire on June 14th of this year. The project site is located on at 304 Motor City Court between Detroit Lane and McHenry Avenue in the Modesto area. Excuse me. The operation was approved in 2019, and the term of the development agreement was for 5 years, which is, like I said earlier, expiring today. Based on the required fees of the development agreement for cultivation and third-party distribution, Irish City Farms over the past 5 years have paid the county a total of $202,400 in community benefit fees. They've paid $33,000 in community benefit contribution fees prior to the program suspension, and they are current on the fees owed to the county without a single late payment during this year. They have achieved their commercial cannabis activity permit for 2022, and then it was reissued in 2023. And they have completed all annual inspection correction notices, Since 2022, there have been 11 calls for service from the Sheriff's Department at the location, but they were all associated with false security alarms. With the expiration of the original DA forthcoming, staff has proposed a new development agreement with a 2-year term that has the automatic termination clause to correspond with the potential passage of tax in November of 2024. Staff has proposed the same indoor cultivation rates for this particular operator with a community benefit rate of $70,000 annually. There's also the same rate for third-party distribution, which would be $30,000 annually, or 3% of gross receipts, whichever is greater. All other terms of the development agreement would be the same as the operators that you've seen previously. The county's Planning Commission held a public hearing for this proposed new development agreement on April 18th, 2024. During the public hearing, no one spoke in opposition or support of the request. The Planning Commission recommended approval of the proposed development agreement, included all findings that are before you this morning. So with that, the Planning Commission has recommended approval to the Board of Supervisors. Staff is also recommending that the Board of Supervisors approve this while also conducting a public hearing, find the project exempt from CEQA, and instruct staff to file a notice of exemption, find the development agreement is consistent with the County and Government Code for adoption of a new development agreement, authorize the chair to execute and record the development agreement, as well as introduce, waive the reading, and adopt a new ordinance that will also rescind ordinance number 1238, and then ordering the filing of notice of determination for the original development agreement adopted with the original use rent. And that concludes my presentation, and we're here to answer any questions.
Any questions by members of the board?
This is the way we'd like to see it.
Right, gonna take it out to the public. Any members of the public wanting to comment on this item or ask questions?
Good morning, Chair Graywall, members of the board. Just briefly, this one's extremely straightforward. We've had 0 issues in operation over the last 5 years. We're completely current on all of our fees, but for the false alarms, which I think my wife set one off opening the garage after dropping the kids off this morning, there's been 0 incident. We are proud to be here with the Planning Commission's unanimous recommendation of approval, as well as staff's recommendation, and we thank staff for all of their efforts in putting this together for us this morning. With that, I'd ask that you adopt the staff and Planning Commission recommendation of approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding the operation. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, so I'm going to bring this back to the board if there's any further questions or a possible motion.
Motion to approve all staff recommendations.
Second.
Motion by Supervisor Chiesa, second by Supervisor Chance Condit. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays?
Nay.
All right, motion carries 4-1.
Thank you.
All right, next is discussion item, approval to ratify the proclamation of a local emergency due to the migration of beet leafhopper in Stanislaus County. Conducting the conversation will be Sheriff Dirksey and Linda Pinfold, Ag Commissioner. All right, good morning, Sheriff.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I will be very brief since I do not know a whole lot about the beet leafhopper personally, but as the current director of the Office of Emergency Services, it is part of my duties to proclaim states of emergency as necessary. Last week, as you know, the Ag Commissioner requested that we make such a proclamation in support of our local farmers, which I am a strong proponent of, but I will now turn it over to Linda so that she can explain to you the reasons why this is critical. Linda?
Good morning, Chairman Grewal, members of our board, CEO Hayes, and Thomas Bose, as well as those in attendance today. So I'm here today to present and request that your board ratify the request for a proclamation for the local emergency due to the migration of beet leafhopper into Stanislaus County. So I want to give you guys a little bit of background before I actually get into the request. That way, because we're looking at a biological system here. So the main issue here is actually not so much the beet leafhopper, but the vector, but the disease that it vectors, which is a virus. So this disease is called beet curly top virus. It is an economically important virus disease in the western United States. The earliest records of it being found in California in the San Joaquin Valley date back to the mid-1920s. There was a big loss in around 1925. It's such an important pest or disease, pest of concern, that in 1943, California Department of Food and Agriculture set up a program to help keep it minimized or controlled. The disease affects over 300 species of crops and weed plants. There's a number of locally common weed species, many of which are annual and perennial. There's a lot of perennial weed species. Susceptible crops, wide variety here again, beets of course, a lot of cucurbits like melons and cucumbers. But in this regard, the crop that we're most concerned about and what this is, this proclamation is dealing with is tomatoes. The symptoms, and I'll show you some stuff on this, some slides on this later on, but symptoms include small twisted leaves with purple veins, thick and crisp leaves, yellowing and death of mature leaves, small fruits that ripen prematurely, reduced fruit and quality yield, and stunted growth. It's a Gemini virus, so actually if you see it under a microscope, it actually looks kind of like a, well, I don't know how to describe it, but it's interesting to see. But this disease is only vectored by beet leafhoppers. So now to understand a little bit about beet leafhoppers, so they're not really big. They're only about 3.5 millimeters long. They're green, torpedo-shaped. Both adults and nymphs, which is what you're seeing in this photo here of the adults and the nymphs, are very mobile. They can jump. They're very sensitive to motion. They have at least 3 generations every year in the valley. And so I like to, if I can ask you to kind of think of these guys maybe more akin to mosquitoes, they have piercing, sucking mouth parts. And it's these piercing, sucking mouth parts, it's their feeding habit that allows them to pierce a plant and feed, and they can inject and leave behind virus particles inside that plant. The leafhoppers carry the virus and need only to feed for a minute on an uninfected plant to transmit this virus. Leafhoppers that have acquired the virus can transmit the virus for the remainder of their life. However, the number of plants infected decreases when the insects are not continually or frequently feeding on infected plants. All right, so BLH overwinters in the foothills of the coastal range west of Central Valley. There, BLH feed on and lay eggs on perennial weeds that germinate following the rainy season. These host weeds can be infected with the virus, BCTV, which the BLH ingests and accumulate as they feed. As the rain stops and the foothills dry, the BLH migrate to the Central Valley floor in search of weeds to complete their life cycle. As BLH migrate to the valley floor in search of the preferred annual weeds, they feed on susceptible agricultural crops, including tomatoes, and infect them with BCTV. The BLH migration into the valley floor tends to occur between March and April. This coincides with the start of the growing season when BCTV susceptible crops are at their most vulnerable stages of early growth. However, while most incidents of BCTV infection occur at the start of the season, infection can occur throughout the growing season. This is because BLH can persist on the valley floor for 3 generations, with the potential to continue spreading the virus as they move from one host weed to crop. In late fall, BLH returned to the foothills to overwinter. All right, so here I just wanted to talk about a few things so you can understand a little bit about our tomato industry. So right now, tomatoes are being planted. They're near the end of the planting time on the west side of the county. Tomatoes are highly important to our local economy. In 2022, they were our number 10 commodity and valued at almost $53.5 million, and almost produced on almost 10,000 acres. It's important to know that there are no beet curly top virus-resistant varieties of tomatoes known. The tomatoes are planted as transplants. When they're planted as transplants, they're approximately 5 to 6 weeks old. They're planted. Probably a few weeks after that, they begin to flower. After they flower, and this is when they really need to be having that protection, and you'll see why as I move on into these slides. But it's at that point that they're particularly vulnerable, and once they start to flower, they really need some extra protection. They put on the fruit, and they're usually harvested as early as late July. Usually it's throughout the month of August. I also want to point out too that if you take a note here, I've had reports from industry that they are observing beet leaf hopper in the west side of the county, and as well, this is some data that so from California Department of Food and Agriculture. You can go onto their website, but this is data from their surveying, and they are also observing beet leaf hopper in our county as well. So it's here now. Okay, so symptoms that you'll see on the young tomato plants. So the spread of BCTV into tomato fields depends on the seasonal cycle of the beet leaf hopper. The leaf hoppers can transmit the virus after 4-hour latent period and cannot inoculate in as little as 1 minute of feeding. The most efficient transmission occurs after a 48-hour acquisition period. A tomato plant can begin to show symptoms of the virus 7 to 14 days after infection. Generally, young plants are the most susceptible to infection and transmission. Young plants that are infected with the disease are usually killed. Plants that are infected at a later stage of development may survive, but they will be yellow with stunted growth. The leaves become thicker and crisper and will roll up as the petioles of the leaf roll downward, which gives the disease the name. Leaves will also turn a dull yellow color with purple-colored veins. The fruit will ripen prematurely and will be dull and wrinkled, which is a characteristic symptom of curly top. The calyx tissues of the flowers will often be abnormally large and thickened as well. Both normal and affected fruit will be visible on the same stem if the plants are infected after fruit set. Infected plants are usually scattered in the field. Plants infected with the virus will not recover and will die or remain stunted without additional flowering and setting more fruit. Okay, so what this is showing here is please understand that there's very limited tools available to control this pest. 3 of these tools and these are the pesticides that are recommended from University of California Cooperative Extension. 3 of these pesticides are a newer chemistry. When I'm saying newer, this is really chemistry that's come out in like the 1990s, I'm guessing, for neonicotinoids. One of these, imidacloprid, is actually used for fleet control on dogs. Advantage is the example. The 4th one, carbaryl, is a very, very old chemistry, probably from about the 1970s. It has a lot of concerns also when it comes to people's health. For neonicotinoids, the concern for them, and I'll be talking about this a little further, is in regards to pollinator protection. Okay, so so what's changed? We've had this pest around, we've been dealing with this, so maybe the question might be, well, why are we needing to look at this now? Well, here's what's changed. As of this past January, a package of regulations went into effect, and these this package focuses on neonicotinoids, which are those 3 pesticides out of those 4 that are recommended by UC Cooperative Extension. This package makes it so that way growers cannot apply this pesticide at all when it's in flower. That is a good portion of these young tomatoes' lives. It's crucial to be able to protect them from being infected at this point because they're not going to be able to. They may die, they may be stunted, but they're certainly not going to be able to produce the level of fruit that the grower would expect or need. So there's a good potential of having crop loss. But within this code, there's also an allowed exemption, and this is where this declaration comes into play. So this part of the regulation allows for an emergency proclamation or declaration to be made as a local emergency, and this is what our sheriff and OES have taken my recommendation and they have done. This also requires that the operator of the property has to, if they go forward and they do a treatment before they can treat, they have to have it looked at by a professional PCA, pest control advisor, and they have to have a recommendation, and they have to keep that recommendation and follow that recommendation. Have to keep that recommendation for at least 2 years. Okay, so this is not the first county that's proposing this. Back in April, Kern, Kings County, and Fresno County went ahead and they've put in these emergency declarations. Fairly recently in Madera and Merced, they also put forth an emergency declaration. Okay, so the proclamation of emergency, this was declared by the Director of Emergency Services last week on 5/9 due to the migration of beet leafhopper into Stanislaus County. Pursuant to the government code, and it was done pursuant to the government code and the regulation, it allows neonicotinoids, pesticides to be applied only to tomatoes to control beet leafhopper, which is the vector of beet curly top virus, and owners who apply neonicotinoids must obtain a recommendation from a licensed pest control advisor and retain a written document for at least 2 years. I also want to add on to this, because of additional regulations that are in place, if their flowers, if they're using any of those pesticides and they have any flowering plants, including flowering weeds, they're required to do what's called a bee check, and if there's any beekeepers within a mile of their field, they're required to notify, and beekeepers that are registered within a mile of their field, they're required to notify those bees. Lastly, and I think it's very important to know, bees do not forage on honeybees do not forage on tomatoes. It's not a reward for them. They can't get in to get to the pollen and the nectar. So I think that's another element that's really important to hear. So the issue, like I said, in regards to the use of neonicotinoids and the regulation is regarding pollinator protection. However, understanding the biology and the regulations that are in place, pollinators should still be, particularly honeybees, would still be well protected. So because of that, there are 2 recommendations that we have. One is to ratify the proclamation, and the second is to authorize the Sheriff Director Quarter to take necessary actions in accordance with the Stanislaus Code. So that's my presentation. Is there any questions?
Right. Any questions from members of the board?
I do have one question I should have asked you earlier is, so the neonicotinoids, they are systemic.
That's
in
correct.
nature, so it's brought into the plant. So if there's not a piercing, sucking, if something just lands on it, or whatever that is, an invertebrate, an insect of some sort lands on it, does it affect them like the pesticide would, the contact pesticide Carbajal? We don't,
Carbaryl.
Carbaryl. I
Yeah,
don't use
so
that
the
anymore
difference
anyway.
is, that's a great point, thank you, yes. So neonicotinoids are systemic. The whole idea is that when the insect goes to feed on that plant, that they feed on it, and then in that little moment, they ingest it, and that's what kills them. It's not actually touching the plant. From what my understanding of the chemistry with neonicotinoids, unlike Carbaryl and many other insecticides, is that if it touches them, they will die. So one is a surface contact, the other is is a surface killer, the other neonicotinoids is because of ingestion. And that's how it works, frankly, also on your dogs too. If they get bit by fleas for advantage, it's not because they don't get fleas that jump on them, it's when they go to bite the dog that they end up ingesting it. So that's the way to think about it.
Any other questions? All right, I'm going to take it out to the public, if there's any members of the public
Thank you.
having any questions.
Good morning, Bianca Lopez with Valley Improvement Projects. I want to share my concern about the use of neonicotinoids in this emergency declarance. As mentioned, the neonicotinoids are systemic. What wasn't mentioned is how it affects the public health. This is a pesticide that affects reproductive harms. It affects pregnant women, creates birth defects, and low sperm count in men. There is no talk about the alternatives. There are alternatives to the neonicotinoids. There are some biological ways and other non-toxic pesticides that can be used to address this issue, as other counties have been informed by other pest control advisors, some of those also include cultural control methods. There are other, the three neonicotinoids that are proposed by the UC IPM was updated in 2013 and it was based on old data. It recommends 3 neonicotinoids but no biologicals. And so this is a real concern. I think we need to re-examine the emergency declarations in the context of the sustainable pest management and which is a roadmap that the Department of Pesticide Regulation has created to reduce the pesticide use of to eliminate toxic pesticide use in our food systems. And it doesn't just affect honeybees. This also affects bumblebees. And those are also pollinators that are really important to our ecosystems. So that's one of my major concerns, that we are not looking at the true alternatives to the neonicotinoids. And I would like to request that the county, the ag commissioner, really look to DPR for these sustainable practices that are not as toxic, that are just less lethal or less contaminant. The neonicotinoids also affect our water. I'm looking for my stats on how it affects water. Neonicotinoids regularly pollute water sources, and traditional chlorination treatment typically fails to remove them from tap water. These pesticides also contaminate our food. Neonic residues are found in 86% of the U.S. honey, and they show up in popular produces. And because neonics are actually in the fruit and the vegetable themselves, they can't be rinsed or peeled off. Often neonics are most used in, or prophylactically, which is another way of saying whether they are needed or not. And so I hope that farmers are only applying this if needed. pesticides create a vicious cycle. They also affect, not only will they affect the bumblebees and the honeybees, women who are pregnant, it also affects our water and the soil health. We want to make sure that farmers can thrive and that they are good stewards of the land. But if we keep using pesticides, we are creating these toxic pesticides like the neonicotinoids without looking at the alternatives and organic solutions. Farmers are going to be stuck in this systemic chaos where they're going to have to keep looking for other stronger pesticides to use while still contaminating our water and our soil. Thank you.
All right, any other members of the public with any questions, comments?
Good morning. Daniel Bays, a tomato grower from the Wesley area. Thank you, Linda, and thank you, supervisors, for considering the emergency declaration today. As a grower and a farmer, I think Linda covered it pretty well, but not every year is curly top virus and beet leafhoppers a concern. There's just a lot of environmental conditions that go into that. Having the rainy conditions that we did, a lot of dry grass up in the hills that's dried out with the wind, and then seeing the leafhoppers move into the valley farther south and then move north. Curly top virus is a big concern for us this year. Using the neonicotinoids on our crops, like any other chemistry that we use, we look at all of our options, evaluate what's most beneficial and effective for us. We look at the sustainability of the environment, the business, and the tomato industry as a whole. And it's a very important crop, especially for the west side of Stanislaus County, but even when you look at tomato processors here within Modesto and Oakdale and other parts of the county, curly top virus can be a huge issue in a tomato crop and decimate yields if we're not able to control it early on. So my request and my thank you is just to allow us to have the tools in our toolbox so that we can use them if we need them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Board. I'm Katie Diemel. I'm the Executive Director of the Stanislaus County Farm Bureau, and I just want to echo a little bit of what Daniel said. We represent about 1,600 grower members here in Stanislaus County. We want to thank Linda and the Sheriff both for recognizing that those conditions exist and could be a potential problem for a lot of our tomato growers here in the county, which could also trickle down and affect the tomato processors and a lot of industry within our county. This provides a valuable tool in the toolbox to be used, at the recommendation of a PCA, somebody that can evaluate the different conditions that are happening within those crops and be an option available. So thank you very much for considering this tool to be used, and we hope that you could support this declaration. Thank you so much.
Any other questions from members of the public? All right, seeing none, I'm going to bring it back to the board for any further questions or a possible motion.
I guess I'd like to just touch on a few items because first of all, I want to thank Bianca and Katie and Daniel for coming in today. We don't take these things lightly, and I know that I'm a farmer, so in some ways I could come off as a homer, but that's not the case. When you look at integrated pest management on our farm, it's about trying not to spray. I do everything in my power not to spray because spraying costs money, and sometimes there's secondary pest outbreaks depending on how bad the issue is. So we've gone through the integrated pest management, and we know that the orchard sanity of knocking all your mummies and mowing them up in our capacity as nut growers, that is absolutely the best way to prevent spraying in the following season. And so when we look at these outbreaks, and because the host is up in the hills, right? It's weeds up in the hill is the host overwintering site, and it's very difficult based on where all the tomatoes are planted, because the majority of them are planted along the west side, which is along the west side hills, to prevent this short of going and mowing up weeds a mile or two into the foothills. So I understand why it's an issue, and typically you get bigger years and smaller years. And so I would hope, and I could look at Daniel, and I know Daniel doesn't want to spray any more than he has to spray or put out a field soil application. And I like that we're concerned about the bees. Obviously, that's a huge concern everywhere with just about everything we use. I do agree that, and I was asking you a partial leading question, I didn't know the answer to it, but the systemic pesticides that we do apply seem to work much better. Over application of anything creates resistance, and that is the bane of our existence. And there's never something in the wings that is there as a alternative control. We're using puffers now, which are pheromone disruption. We're using all kinds of new technology that I would rather do. It's expensive, but again, I don't want to be, because I live right in the middle of a walnut orchard, and literally there's trees up to my backyard, and so I live in that, and so I don't advocate for doing it, but I don't want to take away the ability for when there's an economic outbreak. And the $53 million number, when the 2023 number comes out, it's going to be a lot bigger than that. It's a big part of our crop. It's a big part of the jobs component, not just in the field, but due to the 2 canneries that we have. And so I'm okay moving forward with this. I don't have any issue, and we just have to be smart about it, right? I think all of us would agree.
Thank you for those comments. Any other comments, questions? Possible motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Supervisor Buck Condit, second by Supervisor Terry Withrow. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. All right. Correspondence. Acknowledge receipt of correspondence and refer as recommended on the agenda. Board of Supervisor reports. Any Board of Supervisor reports? Any members of the board?
I guess I should announce, I think it's, I'm not even sure, next week, maybe we have a board meeting next week, right?
Yeah.
Am I going to be out of town? Calling in? Yes. I will be in Washington, D.C. I can never remember from week to week. Washington, D.C. for StanCog, and I will be calling in next Tuesday.
All right. Any others?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just want to remind everybody, as the weather starts getting warmer, more people are starting to visit our waterways and our lakes. We've already had a few tragedies happen here in Stanislaus County. I just want to remind everybody, wear a life jacket if you don't have one. Most fire departments, fire districts, fire stations have a loaner program. You can visit there, get sized up, take one, and you can drop it back off, or if you're going to use it again, keep it, and when you're done with it, bring it back.
I think they have the loaner program also at the regional Woodward and Modesto, right?
You're exactly right, I think so.
All right. Well, that's great advice. Thank you. All right. Nothing else. Government and, legislative, fiscal, and management report. You have Gavin Klein from Congressman Duarte's office.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the board, county staff, community. Thank you, Gavin Klein, Congressman Duarte's office. I just want to talk about a quick bill that Congressman Duarte voted on, and this is House Resolution 7525, the Special Districts Grant Accessibility Act. California's 13th congressional district has 96 special districts up and down the valley from Lathrop to Fresno counties, and those range from water, mosquito, irrigation, fire districts, reclamation, and resources, and many more. So this bill is really important throughout the valley, and what this bill does is it clarifies how an agency recognizes a special district as a unit of local government for the purpose of being eligible to receive financial federal assistance. And the agency requirements are no later than 1 year after the date of which the guidance is issued. The head of each agency shall implement the requirements of the guidance and conform any policy, principle, practice, procedure, or guidance related to the administration of the federal financial assistance programs of the agency. And regarding the reporting requirements, it's no later than 2 years after the date of the enactment of this act. The director shall submit to the Committee on Oversight and Accountability of the House of Representatives and the Committee on Homeland Security and the Governmental Affairs chairs. And Congressman Duarte had the opportunity and was honored to join the Stanislaus Latino Chamber over the weekend for their installation and awards dinner. And it was great to have the congressman out with the community for all the work that the Stanislaus Latino Chamber has done in Stanislaus County. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Gavin. All right, CEO Hayes.
So I want to provide you just a quick snapshot of what we saw in the governor's May revised budget. And just I want to acknowledge up front that the budget document itself, the May revision document, was shorter than usual because there's a fair amount of detail that was not included on Friday's release. And the governor did mention that that detail would be released the following week. So it turns out that's going to be today. So we're expecting to receive further information on some of the details of the types of reductions in budget that we all want to be paying attention to. So our county departments will be monitoring those things closely so that we can report back. I think next week we should have a fairly robust report on this topic, and by then our department should have been able to digest what are some of the specifics that are proposed in the May revise. And as a reminder, the May revised budget is just a budget proposal. It doesn't mean that that's the budget that will be enacted, but you can assume that many of the themes that you saw in the May revise will carry forward in the final budget adopted by the legislature, signed by the governor. So just a couple of things that I want to highlight, because these are some important topics, observations we've had so far. So the May revise estimates the budget shortfall has grown by approximately $7 billion, and that's combined with the governor's budget. The total budget shortfall for the 24-25 fiscal year is actually almost $45 billion. However, after accounting for the early action budget package that was included, that was $17 billion or so than prior solutions. The remaining budget problem is about $27.5 billion, and that's what the governor focused on Friday. The proposed solutions include $4.2 billion in the use of reserves, $3 billion in what they refer to as efficiencies, but basically this is belt tightening expenditures, eliminating 10,000 vacant positions across the state and state government, $11.5 billion in reductions, a little over $6 billion in pausing planned expansions or shifting, delaying deferrals, and an additional little over $2 billion in revenues and borrowing. So that's how they close the gap. When we take a look at the category we're usually focused on are these reductions, because they will have direct impacts here at the local level. History tells us that. We do see a pretty clear direct path to impacts with several of our county departments, including the Health Services Agency, Community Services Agency, probation, behavioral health, our homeless programming, workforce development, transportation, and economic development. So we can see specific areas where we would expect some programming to be impacted to the clients that all of those departments I just mentioned served. There will be others as well that I didn't mention, and we'll report back on those next week. But these ones that I've just mentioned are ones that we see a pretty clear path to reductions. And just one of those that I would like to be a little more specific about would appear to be our public health division with the Health Services Agency. The May revise includes a planned reduction in $300 million in public health funding. There is an allocation here at the local level to our public health department of about $3 million annually that does support county staff. So we'll come back with more details on what we think those specific impacts would be. That's just one example, $3 million out of our public health division at HSA that I think is really important to track. I also want to note that that we are continuing to track any of the language that tries to claw back support for programs that were already essentially awarded. So we have multiple projects that are dependent upon state grant awards, and we're trying to monitor those to make sure that somehow in the details they are not being returned to the state as well. I also want to acknowledge that the governor specifically, when asked questions, when you watch the press conference and so forth around the topic of homelessness, he did indicate that there would be some kind of major announcements today related to the state's homelessness and mental health reforms. So we're not sure, in addition to just the budget issues, what else might be coming out of Sacramento today that will prove to be very, very noteworthy going forward. Last thing for my report is I do want to acknowledge that we did send a couple of legislative advocacy letters over the last week. Those include letters in support of infrastructure support in our underserved communities to supplement the $55.8 million this board has allocated for infrastructure improvements from our ARPA funds, as well as support for the City of Patterson's Del Porto Creek Recharge and Recovery Project grant proposal. So that's what I have to report, and happy to try to answer any questions about the May revise if you have any.
Any questions for the CEO Hayes? Oh, sorry. All right, no questions? Sorry, Jacob. Commissioner from Senator Marie Alvarado Gill's office.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members of the board. Just a brief legislative update from our office. So 3 of our bills, SB 945, that's our wildfire smoke health comes database. So that passed its committee. It is now currently on the suspense file. No opposition and lots of support. SB 1088, which is funding for water infrastructure through Cal OES and the Department of Water Resources. That also passed its committee, no opposition, and is currently on the suspense file. And then SB 1261, which relates to funding for all California state fairs. That is also currently on the suspense file with no opposition. So just wanted to provide that brief legislative report, and if anyone has any questions.
Questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Jacob. Appreciate it. All right. Well, with that, I'll call the adjourn the meeting and ask council to report on closed session items. Thank you, Deputy Herr, for watching over us today. Appreciate it, and appreciate all of you that are in attendance.
Yes, we have closed session this morning. We have a conference with legal counsel, existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, Subdivision D1. We have 2 cases to consider. First case is Thomas Adams Jr. versus County of Stanislaus et al. That's in the U.S. District Court, Eastern District, and the case number is 123CV00045. And the second case is County of Stanislaus versus Yihai Med Kassam Shabi, wow, that was hard, as trustee et al., and that's in the Stanislaus County Superior Court. The case number is CV 22005039. With that, appropriate for public comment.
All right, any public comment? All right, seeing none, adjourn to closed session. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.